Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a special compilation for you of malicious compliance stories that you can put on while you're driving or working or even when you go to bed. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. This compilation is sponsored by my 3D printing website. Visit dangly3d.com where you can get your very own 3D printed Carmen Chameleon Karma Stories channel mascot. And yes, it comes complete with those cookies that I've been bribing you with for subscribing for years now. Check it out at dangly3d.com, link in the description of this video and podcast. Alright, on to the compilation, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from 68 Cadillac. HOA receives a check for all fines. Short history. Fall 2005, SO and I buy our first house together. We're happy. Baby's on the way. House is cute and in a new subdivision. HOA just formed. We're at the end of a blunt cul-de-sac. Quiet, no traffic, neighbors nice. 3-ish years later, the US economy crapped the bed and wiped with the drapes. Over half of the homes in our subdivision have been foreclosed on or are in the process. Me and mine aren't paying on our mortgage. We've moved out and a family friend and his family have moved in. They lost their house. He pays me a discounted rent. I'm not paying the mortgage, but maintaining the house with his rent. The HOA is having troubles maintaining the common areas and keeping things clean because of lack of funds. Junky cars and dead dying landscape are everywhere. One home burned to its foundation. A few months after my friend moves in, red fire lane paint is applied to the curbs of all the cul-de-sacs in the subdivision. I'm furious because it prevents street parking in front of the house. Anytime I need to stop by to fix something or my tenant has a guest, we must park in front of a neighbor's house or in the common collector streets and walk in. I call the local fire department to ask why they need so many fire lanes, seeing how there were no hydrants nearby. They told me they hadn't requested additional fire lanes, nor had they asked for the curbs to be painted. They said anyone can just paint a curb red. It's the signage or a hydrant's presence that makes it a legal fire lane. The paint's just there to help you interpret the signage. I check, and sure enough, no signs. Come to find out, it's a ploy by the HOA to drum up more funds. If they paint the curbs red and call it a safety zone, their bylaws allow them to fine a homeowner for violating the safety zone. Funny also that the HOA president lives at the end of one of the cul-de-sacs, and now the neighbors can no longer park in front of her house without getting safety zone fines. One evening, just past twilight, wearing a high-vis vest, safety glasses, and work boots, I paint over the red curb with boring gray paint, specifically designed for concrete with great coverage. I do the entire cul-de-sac. 3 weeks later, it's red again. 2 days later, gray. 5 weeks, red. Then gray with silicone top sealer. Then red that flakes off almost immediately. Then red again, flakes. Then a sign that reads, "Safety zone, no parking." For lack of payment, the home is now under notification of foreclosure, and I'm working with an agency to help navigate and file all the paperwork needed so we can short sell. Short selling in this context means that although we promised to pay the bank $350,000 plus interest for the house, they'd forgive any amount we owe as long as we turn the house over in good condition. Example, we haven't flushed concrete down the toilets or poked pinholes in the water pipes, which screws us, but it's better than owing $350,000 on a house only worth $165,000 that will be legally taken from us in short order. F you, Reagan. I'm still waiting for that trickle. During a short sale, you're required to notify any potential parties that could have liens on the house. This includes the HOA. I'm up to date on my dues and have no outstanding violations, so I think I'm in the clear. But no, the HOA suddenly comes up with a whole list of violations that haven't been addressed or remedied for 5 months, plus additional fines for the delay. The HOA said they notified me in November, but can't seem to produce copies of these multiple notices of violation. They only have the current one in March listing all the outstanding violations. Examples: black stains on the driveway, uncoiled garden hose, unapproved tree, missing bush, missing foliage, dead tree. I informed them that the stains were tire marks from driving into the garage. The unapproved tree they did, in fact, approve. The missing bushes, they approved the removal. Here's a copy of the plan and your approvals with your name on it. It's not my fault you don't know what you approved. The dead tree. Many trees tend to lose leaves in the fall, like around November. They might look dead if you're just making up violations in February, but are just dormant and waiting for spring. Even if it was dead, you can't replace a tree in November, December, January, or February. No nursery selling saplings that late in the season unless you want a Yuletide tree. How can someone be reasonably expected to replace a dead tree in the off-season? The HOA delays responding, and the short sale is on a timer. If I don't have all legal items, payments for liens, and documents into the escrow officer by certain date, my short sale will fall through, and I'll owe $350,000 plus interest on a $165,000 house that's soon to be foreclosed on. The HOA fines and fees total $1,955. That's $45 short of where felony fraud starts. I'm furious. This HOA is going to F me one last time, and I'll pay for the experience. So I talk to the escrow officer and see what she needs. Only the money for the HOA lien, and you'll close escrow tomorrow. She's seen reams of those come through with similar amounts of fines requested by HOAs that hold up short sales. None exceed $2,000. I ask her what form of payment will satisfy her as an escrow officer. Money order, cash, or check. A check would be easiest for you, don't you think? If I write a check to HOA for $1,955, then hand it to you, that'll satisfy escrow? Yep. You'll mail the check to the HOA after the documents record? Yes. You'll have a check in 25 minutes. The next day, on the phone with the escrow officer, sitting in my car in a parking lot, 9:01 a.m. Did the documents record? Did the short sale go through? Yes. I'll mail out finalized documents and any other items before close of business today. Thank you. Hang up. I walk into the local branch of my bank and inform the teller, I need to place a stop payment on a check. OP added a quick edit on at the bottom. It literally just says, and the HOA never tried to collect or contact us again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called M Day of Earth. It says, did the HOA have the cops go after you for check fraud? OP responded and said, no, I suspect that the HOA knew they'd have to reveal what the check was for. At discovery, they'd be unable to produce original violation notifications, and because they didn't exist, they sure couldn't provide proof they'd mailed them. Sure, the HOA could just make up and backdate notifications of violations, but every violation came with a picture of the offense. New and ongoing violations need new or updated pictures every month. They'd have to Photoshop a whole suite of dead tree, bush missing, hose uncoiled, shots from slightly different angles, and changing seasons, and get everything correct. Ah yes, the HOA, the bane of a lot of people's existences. Hey, let's look at that term, HOA. I know it stands for Homeowners Association, but what else can we do with HOA? Hassling our area. I like that one. Habitual Overreach Authority. That works. Hostile Occupation Agency. That is even better. How about this one? Homeowners Oppression Alliance. That is perfect. This story comes to us from Artful Dodger 1431. Do you have any Grey Poupon? Not my story, but my best friend who got malicious complianced by a chef. Back in 2005, my best friend and I worked for this kids camp. It was a week-long stay kids camp. We'd get campers on Mondays and have fun till Sunday. I, at the time, was a counselor, and so was my best friend. Had a few funny stories from working these summers. and of course, the darndest things kids will say when parents aren't around. I could fill a book with the stories, pranks, and fun days we had. Me and my buddy had become fanatic experts in ultimate frisbee by our 5th year. So every other lunch would be an outdoor sack lunch. The lunches were made by a pretty cool guy, a chef who'd volunteered his hours. He'd stand proudly by his food when it gets served. He had his wife as a sous chef. So my best friend is a wise butt and a class clown type, and if he can get a jab in, he will. During our first sack lunch day of summer, he'd grab his lunch and then walk over to the chef to thank him. But right before thanking the guy for making his lunch, he'd walk up to the guy, then proceed to mime rolling down a window, and then in a fake English accent he'd ask, "Do you have any Grey Poupon?" with his hand extended like the commercial. 5 sack lunches of this same act later, the chef becomes gradually ticked. It was fine the first time, but now you're just a horse's butt. Cue the malicious compliance. The chef prepared a special bag, to which he wrote Mr. Grey Poupon on the label. My best friend is in line with his kids grabbing lunch bags and sees the special labeled bag. He grabs it with surprise. Inside was a normal sandwich, chips, cookie, milk, snack crackers, and 30 packets of Grey Poupon. For the full summer, my friend got a similar bagged lunch with just as many Grey Poupon packets. My friend started asking the chef to hold back as he didn't need that many each time, but the chef kept putting 24 or more inside his bag. Now, cue some more malicious compliance. On the last week of kids, my friend goes to get his lunch bag. The Mr. Grey Poupon labeled bag was filled to the brim in mainly Grey Poupon mustard packets. The bag must have weighed a pound, maybe 2, like someone had dumped a case in the bag. As my best friend grabbed his bag, the chef said, "Support it from the bottom." Days later, with a chuckle, I asked the chef, "What gives with the giant bag of mustard packets?" The chef replies, "Had to finish the crate somehow." On my buddy's last day, he went to his mailbox cubby. Lo and behold, in his mailbox cubby was one last surprise. A full gallon of Grey Poupon mustard as a gift. When I asked the chef secretly some days later, he admitted, "I had to blow the surplus budget on something, right?" Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called AppropriateRip9996. It says, "Chef had to show hospitality somehow. And besides, the guy showed up with an imaginary Rolls-Royce motor car and rolled down the window. You can't just give regular yellow hot dog mustard after that." And just like the commercials, they all ended with an excess of mustard available to the masses. I think OP was showing us their age here because those Grey Poupon commercials are like from the 80s, way back when. And then it was parodied in the Wayne's World movie, which was absolutely beautiful. Sadly, I'm old enough to remember both of those. Was this wonderful malicious compliance? But of course. This story comes to us from Illuminatus Prime. Get your files off my computer? Okay. The setup. While studying at uni, I crossed paths with a hostile professor. Let's call him Professor Nasty Man, who absolutely did not want to be questioned about anything during class. Disruptive, he'd say. "I'm a researcher with a PhD, he'd say. "You're wasting my time, he'd say. "Study harder, he'd say." Some of the other things he'd say would likely get this post deleted if I repeated them here. The trigger. I missed a lecture, so just before the next class started, I asked him if I might have a copy of his lecture notes from the class I'd missed. He blew up at me, slammed his papers down, and started ripping me a new one, saying that if I was not serious about his class, then I shouldn't be in it, and that I should just drop it. This went on until about 5 minutes into the class. Nobody else said a word, and the class continued. Cue the malicious compliance. The uni had a surplus barn where unneeded equipment was palletized and sold at bulk rates. I got there first thing in the morning and spotted a pallet with a bunch of computer junk on it. For $50 US, I ended up with a dot matrix printer, a few 1200 baud modems, and an extended technology PC, monitor, and keyboard setup. Of course, I also got a receipt. My place wasn't far, so I borrowed a wheelbarrow and brought it all home in 2 trips. The printer was beyond repair. Only 2 of the modems still worked. The PC system booted up on the first try. I looked through the directory and saw what looked like drafts of a research paper and a whole lot of data files as well. The hard drive's volume name was the same as Professor Nastyman's, so I rang up his office. His secretary, a sweet grandmotherly type, answered the phone. I explained what I had found. She asked me to hold. A minute or 2 later, Professor Nastyman himself was on the line, telling me to get those files off the computer now. Sir, yes, sir. I did it the right way too. I deleted all the data and document files. Then I overwrote the empty drive space with a huge file full of random bytes of data, deleted the file, and repeated the process 6 more times. Then I reformatted the hard drive with a new OS. The PC booted right up to the DOS prompt, and I was happy with my new PC. The fallout. At the next class session, Professor Nastyman greeted me by name and politely asked if I had removed the files from my computer yet. Of course, sir. I removed those files from my computer, just like you told me to. Why? Were they important? He told me how important the files were. Something to do with 2 or 3 years of research data for a corporate-backed project. Sorry, sir, but you told me to get those files off of my computer, so I did. Your secretary and anyone else listening in will verify that. Those files are gone, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. The epilogue. Professor Nastyman had to default on his project, which looked bad for his department and the university as well. Rumors suggested that he had made no backups because he feared plagiarism. I had a few discussions with the dean and some others about this, but it always came down to Professor Nastyman's own carelessness. I finished the class, got a decent grade, and never saw him again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bexu2. It says, "How careless do you have to be in the first place to get rid of a computer containing the only copies of research data? I'd be overjoyed if I was him and got a call saying someone found some files with my name on it." OP responded to this one and said, "I really don't know what was going through his mind. He was an arrogant reactionary blowhard who shot from the lip and asked questions later. All I care about was that I passed his class and that Flight Simulator ran great on my PC." Bexu2 responded to this and said, "Good on you. Can't imagine what it must have taken for a self-absorbed professor like that to accept ideas other than his own and actually pass the students." OP responded to this one and said, "Maybe he realized with his research down the tubes, he had better focus on being an educator. Maybe he also realized that if he had retaliated by giving me a failing grade, it would have been his job on the line, tenure or not." This professor sounds to me like the kind of person who would back up their files by creating a folder called backup on the same hard drive and saving it to there. I absolutely love stories of bad people getting the karma they deserve, but in this case, I also can't help but feel bad for that professor with years of research going down the drain. That's really gotta suck. This story comes to us from Xenon Zosnek. Include questions from students. About 20 years ago, I studied to become a physics teacher. As part of our curriculum, we had a thing called Didactics Lab. It was a lab where they had some basic devices such as electrostatic machines, pneumatic bench, simple toys, and tools. The drill was that one week we were preparing some experiments and planning a lesson, and the next week actual school children would come and we would present our experiments to them and teach them physics. The lab was run by an older professor who was pretty laid back and a young PhD candidate who was doing everything to show us how important she is. As a part of our preparation week, we had to prepare a lesson plan in which we would indicate our aims, our methods, and predicted outcome. This is what teachers do in regular work, and as my mom was a teacher, I was familiar with the format, so I was simply writing everything as required, including a brief description of the lesson like, Teacher presents the experiment and explains the science behind, then answers questions from the students, etc. The PhD candidate thought this is not enough and demanded that I write much more detailed plans, including the exact questions the students will ask. I told her it's impossible because I can't predict what questions will be asked. She told me to extrapolate on the basis of the questions asked by students during previous classes. So I did. My next lesson plan looked as follows. Teacher switches the electrostatic machine on. Girls are screaming. Boys are laughing at them. One of the boys throws a paper ball at the girls. His pals laugh. The girls are outraged and demand for a teacher to do something. One of the girls asks, "Do you really want to be a teacher? My mom says their pay is crap." Another boy examines the equipment sitting on the shelf and says, "My neighbor has a basement full of electric crap. What do you think he might need it all for?" The teacher tries to conduct the experiment. He is interrupted by a girl announcing, "My auntie is a physics teacher as well, but she lives in another town." One of the boys asks if he can go to the toilet. And so on and so forth. It was like 10 pages long instead of the usual page or two. The PhD candidate was outraged and told me those are stupid questions that no student would ever ask, and I should write only the smart questions. I told her she told me to extrapolate on the basis of previous interactions with the students, and the questions and students' behavior already happened to me at least once. She sent me to the laid-back professor who read my whole plan, chuckling all the way, and told her that I obviously understand kids already, so I don't have to write my lesson plans anymore, apart from one page of brief description of the experiment I planned. The PhD candidate was avoiding me for the rest of the class, but I got a good note in the end. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called The Real Shack Attack. It says, "That's probably a teacher's assistant on a power trip. When making a regular lesson plan, you already have a good grasp of your students and their abilities. I bet the PhD didn't tell anyone the age or grade of the students either. I'm supposed to make up smart questions? For who? Third graders who haven't heard of momentum or inertia? For some middle schoolers who are still learning about thermodynamics? Different grades and schools have different knowledge, abilities, and obviously questions. From a child asking, 'Who is this Newton guy?' to a high schooler trying to figure out what chemical reaction you just demonstrated. It's almost poetic how the PhD candidate, in all her self-important glory, missed the most crucial lesson of all. Real-world teaching doesn't follow a script. It's no wonder she avoided you for the rest of the class. She's not coming back from getting absolutely schooled by someone who actually knows what they're talking about." This story comes to us from Mr. CBA 333. Boss told me how to organize my tools. I have been a mechanic for nearly 15 years. I am the lead tech in my shop, and my company just sold recently to a different corporation, and with that came a new boss. A little bit of history about new boss. He is 22 and the son of one of my older bosses, so everybody suspects a bit of nepotism is at play. The older boss was ruthless and a jerk, and really put a dent into my confidence about being a mechanic, so I may hold somewhat of a grudge against the family, but I try to do my best to move on and just do my job. The new boss and I have some minor issues already in the 3 months he has been here, but I'm the type of person who can generally put my feelings to the side if money keeps ending up on my paycheck. Today, however, that changed. I will admit I am not the most organized person. I have ADHD and at 33 years old am still learning to function without medicine that I weaned off of at 26. My toolbox is normally cluttered, but I keep all my tools in my area or on top of my box. It's the system that works for me. This morning I clocked in and was about to unlock my box when the new boss came up to me and said, "You will not be working on cars today until your box is organized." I said, "My box is organized in the way that it works for me." He shot back with, "Not good enough for me or the company. I need to be able to find tools when I need them, and it needs to look neat and orderly for when corporate comes through." I paused for a second and said, "So are you telling me that you need to be able to find my tools that I have purchased when you need to use them? I don't remember signing that agreement." He nodded and muttered something about insubordination and that he would be passing off all the work to the other technician until it was completed to his satisfaction. I had assumed he was bluffing until 3 cars came in and all 3 tickets were handed to the other tech. I don't have a problem being told to clean up, and I would have even done it his way, but I have a problem with his tone, and this was messing with my paycheck. So while he was in the back doing tire inventory, I opened the top drawer of my toolbox, spread my arms, and swept every single thing into the drawer that I could. I repeated for the second and third drawer until the top was clean. I used the same process for both of my smaller carts until each one could be closed and locked. Then I clocked out for lunch. I'm currently sitting in my car in the parking lot eating lunch and browsing job listings while watching him try to open all of my drawers to use my tools, because 3 more cars came in and the other tech can't handle 6 at a time. OP added an update at the bottom. It says, "Update, I did not expect this to blow up like this. I clocked back in from lunch and boss asked to speak with me. Apparently he called the district manager and also his dad, who is a district manager of another district, for advice. And it sounded like they both told him to make it right and that he could not afford to lose me. I know how it sounds, but it's true. He told me that he just wanted to make a good impression on corporate, who would be coming through in a few weeks, and that he shouldn't have targeted me personally. He paid me for the 3 vehicles he worked on, and I let him know that I was willing to work with him, but if he ever spoke down to me again, there would not be a do-over. I would leave. He also inquired about buying his own tools. He's not a bad dude, just a little anxious, I guess. I suppose I will stick around for a little, as the paychecks are worth it, and the drive is convenient, and I have a wife and a house to pay for. As for some of the responses, yes, I am somewhat of a slob with my toolbox, but I also average 10 to 15 cars a day, so I don't always have the time or the drive to neatly organize my tools daily. He said he will be bringing his toolbox from home and calling or texting to ask to borrow before borrowing. I guess I am somewhat of a rare mechanic, as I don't mind people borrowing my tools as long as they are put back. Also, the empty toolbox comments, I own all 4 of my toolboxes, so they would be coming with me if I left. Thanks for the support, guys. Seems like maliciously complying paid off for once. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Crumbled Newman. It says, I'm not a mechanic, but I have a really good friend who is. We used to play around in the garage on cars he was working on for friends, so I get to hear about mechanic life. One of the lessons he taught me was to never, ever touch another man's toolbox. You bought those tools. What gives him the right to even look at them sideways? It honestly sounds like this new boss just didn't understand how mechanic shops work, especially ones where the mechanics have their own tools. This is driven home in the update where they're now looking into buying their own tools because OP made it clear that they're not to touch anybody else's. As far as corporate coming around, let your people know a little bit early so they can clean up their areas, and that's really all you need to do. It's a mechanic shop. It's going to be a bit dirty. At least it can be organized, but it is going to be dirty. This story comes to us from Time Lady A613, The Mop. This is a story of ongoing malicious compliance. We have one bathroom at home, and the bathroom has a bathtub and one of those shower handles. So my dad is a splasher when it comes to taking baths. If you go into the bathroom after him, it looks like a flood just went by. We are not in a position to question him, as he either yells and throws things or takes it out on my mom by giving her the silent treatment. Sorry mom, you married a prince, huh? So he confiscated a mop to wipe the floor after bathing. But here's the thing. Actually, here's 2 things. 1, he doesn't want anyone to touch, much less use that mop. No, he doesn't wash or dry the mop. It lives in the bathroom. 2, he takes at least 3 baths a day. We end up buying a new mop. Once his mop has finally disintegrated, he will confiscate the new mop and we will buy a mop for the house. And on and on. My sister took his mop and washed it with bleach and took it out to dry in the sun. Dad did not speak to any of us and went to bed without supper. Cue Malicious Compliance. No one ever touched his mop ever again, and my siblings and I started hiding the new mop at our neighbors to keep it safe. He still doesn't know about it. But we all know what happens when a wet mop stays wet in a closed, moist environment. The mop has sat in the bathroom, collecting God knows what, and he just used it to paint over the splashed water after he showers. Yesterday, he had visitors from church, so he demanded we clean the house. We cleaned everywhere but the bathroom, cause we're not allowed to touch the mop. 10 minutes before the guest showed up, he freaked out and asked why the bathroom still looked so disgusting. "But father, you said no one is to touch your mop," my younger sister replied with the fakest of innocent looks. Funny thing is, Dad didn't even think to just take the smelly mop outside. He had to live through his guests using the bathroom with a moldy, smelly mop. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Ian Dosmond. It says, "Just as a confirmation, because you can never tell from inside, this is not normal. This is not okay. And although you may have gotten somewhat used to it, you need to know that it isn't something you should have to get used to. Most people don't have an emotional support rotting mop." Another commenter down below called Eric Mwan said, "Yeah, I'm kinda hung up on your dad being clown crap effing crazy. It kinda sounds to me like there's some kind of mental issue going on here, maybe some OCD, because with OCD, keeping clean can be a very big part of your day. And OP's dad is taking 3 baths, so that kind of fits. But the other part of that with the mop being dirty and moldy and just sitting there, I don't know. I think there's some other mental issues there that might be undiagnosed." This story comes to us from Dinkoy Sam. "Dirty uniforms are fine, then we wearing them." For context, I am working in an IC engine components manufacturing MNC tier 1 company as a shift in charge for machine shop. And our uniform is white shirt and dark blue pants. In a machine shop environment, shirt will get dirty easily, and company will provide only 2 shirts per year. We have raised concerns many times, and as corporate culture, nothing has changed. One day, I am troubleshooting on machine 1 of the hydraulic lines. Got leakage and oil squirted all over. My shirt became soaked in oil. I have only 2 shirts, and next day, I asked admin for an extra shirt. They have not seen the condition of my shirt. Told me some oil stain is not an issue. Still, you can wear it, blah blah blah. And we can't provide additional shirts as we don't have the budget. Malicious Compliance. Following week, our CEO and managers from head office come to visit. An admin team announced to everyone to be disciplined. So me and coworkers discussed and made a plan. On the day of the CEO visit, we came in with the dirtiest uniforms. All have heavy oil and grease stains. Some of them are not at all white due to stains. One of the admin managers sees us and asked and made a fuss. I replied with, "Your team told us oil stains in the uniforms are not a concern." He immediately called that person and we all got shirts within 5 minutes. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bamboozle Patoozle. It says, "Whose bright idea was it to have white shirts as a uniform in a machine shop? Someone who has never worked in a machine shop before?" Another commenter called Series Hybrid said, "For a machinist, there is a reason the industry standard is dark blue. Every color under the rainbow has been tried. Some desk jockey must have thought that white shirts would incentivize the employees to be cleaner and more professional instead of sloppy. All it does is make the workers slower so they don't get their precious white shirts dirty." OP responded to this one and said, "Absolutely, need to work carefully to avoid getting dirty. There are aprons, but considering the heat and humidity, can't wear aprons more than 30 minutes. My previous company had dark blue and didn't have any issues wearing them. White is really effed up." I kind of love this story because it shows that there's nothing like a surprise CEO visit to make the miracles happen. And who knew that all it would take to get new uniforms would be showing up looking like you just crawled out of a diesel engine. Also, what kind of machine shop doesn't have coveralls these days? Those are kinda standard for any machine shop I've seen around here. This story comes to us from ShellLoser42. Just let the kids sort it out themselves. Okay then. Backstory. I live in a town in the Netherlands with a university, and a few years ago, my girlfriend's cousin got accepted as an overseas student. My girlfriend is Japanese. Her family, father, mother, her sister, and herself moved to the Netherlands while she was younger. Her cousin still lived in Japan when she applied, got accepted, and is now living in a student room in the Netherlands. We don't really have dorms here like in the US, but the building she lives in is maintained by the university itself. Said cousin is doing quite well for herself, got good grades, and is well on her way to get her diploma. Partly because of this, the overseas family decided to have their vacation in the Netherlands this year, both for leisure and a bit of a family gathering. This story takes place during the family gathering. My girlfriend's parents and the cousin's parents, plus yet another family, had a meeting in a restaurant in my hometown. They had 2 little kids in tow, sisters. These look like 8 or 9 or so to me, but my girlfriend later told me that they are actually 11 and 12, but did look younger than they were. Probably also because of their school uniform. At least that's what it looked like to me, I don't really know. Anyway, the idea was to catch up with the family, and my girlfriend was asked if she would be willing to keep the 2 young kids busy for a few hours since she was the oldest of the lot. My girlfriend and me are in our 40s, her studying cousin is around 25, and as said, the 2 kids are 11 and 12. My girlfriend didn't mind, but did ask me if I wanted to come along as well. Her cousin didn't mind, the 3 of us had met a few times before already, and well, it was all about keeping the young kids busy anyway. Oh, for the record, the 2 young kids basically only speak Japanese. They do understand bits of English, and can even speak some, but it's mostly Japanese. My girlfriend's cousin speaks both Japanese and English, and has even learned quite a bit of the Dutch language as well. Seriously, for the few years she's been here, in my opinion, it's quite impressive. My girlfriend speaks Japanese, English, and Dutch, and as for me, Dutch, obviously, and English. But over the years, I also managed to pick up a decent bit of Japanese as well, and I can often, not always, understand the general gist of things, as long as it's not too quickly spoken or too complicated. So basically, it was all English and Japanese between us. A bully shows up. We took the kids for a walk through my hometown and they were quite interested, but when we went past a playground, that also quickly got their attention. So the 3 of us decided to go sit on a bench and let the kids have some fun. There were several activities like an air balloon castle, swings, and a sandbox for younger kids to play in, just plenty of things to do. The 2 wanted to go into the castle, which was fine with my girlfriend, as long as they made sure to only use the entrance and exit, which was located on our side, so that they wouldn't get lost and we could keep track of them. The 3 of us talked quite a bit, but also kept eyes on the castle. So around 15 minutes later, I spot the 2 again by accident near the exit with a little kid in between them. I have no idea, but I'd say she was around 8 or so. I can't really tell exactly what's going on, but I did see the kid point to the area of the sandbox, and that's where the 3 of them headed next. Before I can say anything to my girlfriend, a young lady walks up to us and asks, in Dutch, if we have seen a little girl passing by. This seems way too coincidental to me, so I ask, is she wearing a pink dress by any chance? The woman's face lights up as I tell her that she seems to be with my girlfriend's younger cousins, and I point to the sandbox. But when we look over, we now also see an older boy near the girls. I'm not good with guessing ages, let's just say that he was bigger than them, and he's clearly harassing them. The small girl is visibly crying, but also comforted by one of the 2 younger cousins, while the other is keeping the boy away from her. We all walk over to the sandbox, just when the boy manages to shove one of the cousins out of his way, and he's clearly trying to bully the young girl in the pink dress. But now stopped by the other cousin, which is when we arrive. The woman who is with us berates the boy and tells him to stop picking on young children, but the little brat clearly isn't very impressed. Next moment, his mother, so I assume, storms over yelling, and she has every appearance of a Karen, or a Toki as we tend to call them over here. A little argument ensues, mainly between the mother of the girl in the pink dress and our Karen. It goes back and forth, but it's apparent that according to his mother, the brat did nothing wrong by picking on a girl half his own size. And this fine example of a mother even has the audacity to blame the other mother for raising such a weak little C-word. And then the Karen says, "Kids will be kids, just let them sort out their own problems already." But she does take the boy with her as she walks away. The mother gets ready to grab her kid and leave, but in the meantime, the girl has completely calmed down and is actually having a great time with the two cousins. Unknown to anyone else yet at this time, my girlfriend decides to comply with the earlier suggestion. First, she asks the mother to reconsider leaving because the kids are having so much fun together. My girlfriend also comments how amazing kids are because they clearly don't speak the same language, yet they seem to understand each other just fine and are having a good time. The mother agrees, and my girlfriend now addresses both her cousins in Japanese, and it sounded very serious to me. Something about the tone, the way she talked, and also looked at both girls, even a bit sternly. They both nodded and clearly said hi, aka yes ma'am. I think I even saw a small head bow, but I'm not too sure. Our little group goes to sit on a bench nearby, and for the next 5 minutes, nothing happens. We're just having some small talk. Then, the bully returns. The mother of the small girl wanted to stand up, but gets stopped by my girlfriend, who tells her that she has nothing to worry about, because the kid is completely safe. Just watch, trust me on this. The mother is visibly uneasy, but does remain seated. Which is when I noticed that the behavior and stance of the two cousins has completely changed. They seem much more confident and relaxed. The boy starts making a fuss while one of the cousins stands up, points to him, and yells something at him in Japanese, obviously. He once again tries to shove her out of his way, but this time she's faster. She steps aside, does something with her leg, and gives him a huge shove. Next moment, he's eating sand. No, literally. He gets up visibly angry while his face is covered in sand. This time, he becomes violent and actually tries to hit one of the cousins with his fists. Yeah, tries. She evades one attempt, then grabs his hand, spins it around, and the next moment, the boy finds his arm twisted behind his back, and he starts screaming. The other cousin now also stands up, pats the young girl on the head, makes another move, and once again, the boy gets shoved to the ground, this time by both cousins. Hard. When he looks up, the other cousin actually makes a moving gesture, as if she wants to kick him, but without actually moving her legs or anything. She's obviously just threatening him. My girlfriend pokes me with a huge grin on her face and tells me, "Surely that deserves a point for self-restraint, don't you think?" She's visibly loving every moment of this. Apparently, the boy isn't totally stupid and he runs off, while one cousin immediately turns to the young girl again, who is clearly still having a good time. "What the heck was that?" the mother asks. My girlfriend tells the mother that her cousins are taking the same self-defense classes as she and her sister once did, and that she had decided to pull ranks by telling her cousins that it was okay for them to actually defend themselves, as long as they didn't overdo it, of course. The mother wanted to know more about these classes, but unfortunately for her, my girlfriend had to tell her that the actual school was located all the way out in a suburb of Tokyo, so not something her daughter would be able to attend. Mummy returns with a BOA, a guard. We're chatting some more for the next 10 minutes, after which the bully's mother storms over to us with a BOA in tow. BOA is basically a deputy but without the proper training nor having any weapons. Generally speaking, most of them usually handle ticketing people. He tells us that he has gotten a complaint from the woman about people beating up her kid, to which the mother of the young girl immediately snaps, "Whatever happened with letting the kids sort out their own problems?" Now the funny thing is, apparently the whole spectacle didn't really go unnoticed, and before we could say or do anything, someone else had stormed over as well. "I saw the whole thing, officer," an older woman said. Her brat, pointing at the Karen, was harassing and beating the kid in the pink dress when those two awesome kids stepped in and protected her. Meanwhile, another man had walked over. "Officer, that brat got everything he deserved. He started it. The only thing that happened was that those girls defended themselves from him." The officer listened to everyone's statements and ended up deciding to ticket the mother of the brat. I assume for disturbing the peace, but I don't know any details because at this time, we decided to leave and we went our separate ways. Aftermath. During our walk back to the hotel and restaurant, the cousins told us the whole story, and I actually learned something new as well. While they were in the castle, they saw the boy harassing the young girl in the pink dress, and immediately decided that this wasn't right, also because he was almost twice their size. He actually pulled on her hair while she was already crying, which made the cousins plain out angry. But the only thing they did was get the boy away from the girl. One cousin distracted the boy by blocking him from grabbing the girl's hair again, and she also started taunting him, while the other comforted the young girl and led her to the exit. But the one we agreed on. So the girl's mother never saw her leave and got worried. The other cousin managed to lose the boy in the crowd, at first anyway, and she joined her sister near the exit. So I asked my girlfriend why they didn't do all that stuff right away, to which she told me that they weren't allowed to. The first rule of self-defense is apparently always leave if you can, and her cousins are at a level where the use of these techniques outside their school is strictly prohibited, unless there's an actual threat of course, or if they've been given direct permission by an elder of the same school. A rule which my girlfriend was stretching a little bit, but she told me that she would write up the whole altercation so that the cousins could take her letter back with them. She was actually not kidding when she talked about points for self-restraint, because that would actually be her advice in the letter. But yeah, typical hypocrite behavior, let the kids sort it out, until it suddenly doesn't go your way, eh? Thanks for reading. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called RL Friday Mang. It says, while violent stories rarely pop up here, this is a result where everyone learned and no one was seriously hurt. The boy was embarrassed, but learned that girls can defend themselves and that there are consequences for their behavior, which clearly the mother isn't teaching. The cousins got to learn what standing up for justice is like, and that restraint in class is hard, but doing it in real life is exemplary. And finally, the young girl now has heroes to look up to, and I would not be surprised if she finds herself wearing a martial artist robe soon either. This isn't the normal stuff I read on here, but it is heartwarming. I always teach my kids that defending yourself should only be done when necessary. You never initiate a fight, but if someone else does, you make sure you handle it. Don't overestimate your own strength, because there's always someone out there who could be stronger or more aggressive. Avoid the confrontation when possible, and if you must act, do it swiftly and remove yourself from the situation. The biggest things we should teach them are avoidance and de-escalation, but if that doesn't work, make sure they can handle themselves as well. This story comes to us from 68 Cadillac. It doesn't look like you have enough to do. Got my first career job in a local government, keeping tabs on its real estate and the legal documents relating to said real estate. I'm wet behind the ears. My first 40-hour per week career job. This was a time when multitasking was a huge buzzword in business, and it seemed like every single job I applied for required someone with good multitasking skills. I thought it was BS. I worked best when only working on one task at a time, and managing my workload via daily time allotment schedules. That is, I'd schedule my work in 15-minute lumps when I got in the morning, and work on those tasks. That way, I never missed a deadline, or had a project fall between the cracks. For example, some tasks got slotted 2 hours, some whole days, some just 15 minutes. I love to keep my desk clean. All tasks that appeared in my physical inbox were sorted and prioritized. The paperwork was then filed and the task scheduled for later that day, or later in the week, depending on how urgent it was. Consequently, my desk was always empty, save one folder, and a few maps related to the folder. Once one task was done, that folder and its maps were filed. A new folder and its maps were retrieved. One afternoon, my direct boss walks in, looks at my desk with its one folder and 2 maps, looks at my clean top filing cabinets, looks at my empty inbox, physical one you actually put papers and folders in, grunts, and walks out. 20 minutes later, my boss strides back into my office. drops 18 inches of folders and papers onto my inbox. States proudly and firmly, "OP, it doesn't look like you have enough to do. This should keep you busy." He smiled and strutted back to his cluttered office. It was busy work. 3 weeks of mind-numbing paperwork. Nothing outside of my work description, just more like duplicate files, old contracts, unorganized paperwork, and/or outdated maps. In dealing with the dump's aftermath, I learned my lesson. While doing my actual job was important, it was equally important that hard work appear to be happening, so I could do my actual job. I started saving old files, old maps, and old legal documents. I rebound up papers that normally would have been recycled into legitimate-looking folders. I transformed my office into a duplicate of my boss's chaotic file and paper hellscape. My inbox always had papers and folders in it. Height and number would vary daily, never empty. I had folders piled on top of the file cabinets, folders in stacks on the floor, 24 of those white office boxes packed with files towering around my work area. I even had a map rack with old maps rolled up in it. My office looked utterly cluttered. I even took to walking everywhere with a steno pad, a file folder, and sometimes a map under my arm. Didn't matter where. Getting coffee? Pad and file. Pooping? Pad and file. Pointless meeting? Pad and 2 files. Actual necessary productive meeting? Pad, relevant file, relevant map. Every morning, right after scheduling my real work, I would shuffle the fake folders and paper around on my desk and work area. Move the boxes about every 2 weeks, but in all that visual chaos, I kept one area of my desk clean, where the real work happened. One day, my boss peeked into my office, the door bumping into a stack of 3 full white boxes placed behind it, preventing it from fully opening. A single file fell off the top, spilling its guts all over the floor. He looked around, paused at the mess he just made, then, sorry about that. What are you working on?" I rattled off 3 of the highest priority properties on the current week's schedule, and the tasks for each. "Alright, I'll give this to someone else," and walked on down the hall. I'd already completed those tasks. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Quiver Null. It says, "I always make myself look busier than I really am. Otherwise, I get to do other people's jobs too." Another commenter down below called Hoser said, "Take a tip from HR. Always, always, always make sure to tell everyone how busy you are and how little time you have while doing absolutely nothing. The appearance of work is more important than the work itself." Ah yes, the age-old art of strategic cluttering. It's like feng shui, but instead of balancing energy, you're balancing the illusion of being swamped with busy work. Sometimes, I guess, looking like you're drowning in paper is the only way to keep from drowning in, well, more paper. This story comes to us from Revolution Friendly 56. Loyalty goes both ways. I am a worker bee in a company that got bought out by a much bigger company earlier this year. Even though we were a small company, the teams were flexible and everyone helped each other, and the company was profitable. Not to the new ownership though. Apparently, our company was crap and needed to be immediately fixed with structure, hierarchy, and order. The managers I've worked so well with over the years are gone. The new owners promised no change, nothing to worry about. Everything will be the same. Except that within a month, all the experienced managers who made the workplace so great to work for are let go. What is worse, they've been replaced by emotionless walking husks resembling ghosts with hammers as their only tool, and we're all nails. Never mind the incessant preaching of company spirit and loyalty and respect and company values. We all moan at these pep talks, we all yawn at the town halls. Then the less subtle threats. Oh, you're not a team player if you don't do X, Y, and Z. You need to work overtime, or else that's not fair to everyone else. You're leaving on time again? The culture certainly has changed. For one, I didn't even dare to take off early to pick up my kids from school anymore. Finally, the toxic culture of fear and backstabbing. Every word said against the direction, even off the cuff and chit chat, and every little facial or non-verbal gesture against the flow are immediately and harshly met with reprimands. For example, another worker bee was recently let go for restructuring despite stellar work performance. He just couldn't keep his thoughts to himself, I guess. I hope I painted a good picture of what life under the iron fist is like. Many of us are contemplating leaving, but the job market is quite depressing in our area. The cost of living is high, and we are afraid of being the neck that sticks out. So everyone suffers in silence. The company recently appointed a new CEO who, in his opening introduction to everyone, demanded undivided loyalty to him. It means we must follow his every direction. It means we must smile in his presence and be super upbeat. I think the expectation here is we must cry like North Korean women in the presence of Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. You want us to have absolute loyalty? I believe loyalty goes both ways, but we can show you loyalty. We all got the message. You want us to play Oscar-winning actors and actresses instead of actually getting work done and speaking our minds to make the company better? You got it. For those of us who read and trust each other, but we still need to be careful, we would have hours-long meetings with each other on topics that sound important but don't actually matter. We make sure our days are jammed-packed full of discussions on how to move initiatives forward, but never actually discuss anything of substance, and never have aggressive action items to follow up on. We absolutely never forget to praise the leadership in the meeting minutes. Off the books, though, there's lots of small talks for the sake of team building. Whenever we're questioned by those husks of a ghost, we'd pull out the corporate roadmap and point to the initiatives we spent so many hours working on. We'd defend our time with the budget that recently got rolled out. Look, we're on side. We've gone so far as requesting additional resources in the next year's budget to ensure our very busy initiatives continue to make headway. We're basically creating a public perception of busy without actually doing much. We were a lean small company. Now we're a fat busybody where everything is bloated and compartmentalized. We shut our faces and we nodded. We clapped the hardest after every presidential speech, and we lost money in the last several months. That's the price we pay to give one-sided loyalty. We're still looking for other jobs. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Death Walker Lives. It says, "The beatings will continue until morale improves." Ah yes, the age-old tactic of loyalty by force. Nothing says thriving workplace culture like turning employees into robots programmed for forced enthusiasm. But did anybody else notice the tactics described in this are really similar to the CIA's simple sabotage field manual? It includes ways to subtly sabotage organizations from within by doing things like holding excessively long, meaningless meetings, delaying decisions, and focusing on all the trivial details, all under the guise of being productive. OP, soon you'll be requesting memos about memos, and no one's even going to notice that you're still plotting your escape. This story comes to us from No Go Away 4. You want a male dentist? Sure. This happened about 2 years ago when I was still in dental school. I'm sorry about any mistakes, English isn't my first language. I want to start by saying that I'm a very nice dentist. I'm not a nice person at all, but I'm very nice to my patients. I'm also pretty good at my job. I won't say I'm the best, but I know that I'm good. That day, however, I was not in a good mood. A lot of terrible things happened to me in the morning that ruined my day, and as if that wasn't enough, I went to my job just to find out that Dr. Smith, fake name obviously, is the attending doctor. He is the worst. He will show up 15 minutes after we start working on our patients. I don't think he realizes that we are just students and we might need help. Anyway, it just put me in a worse mood. So the secretary gave me a patient. One thing you need to know is that if the patient wants the same gender doctor because of religious reasons, then we have to give them a same gender doctor. But if the patient wants another doctor for no good reason, then it's up to us. We can send them to another doctor, or we can tell them that it's either me or no one, and they are free to leave if they don't like me. I got the patient. I put on a smile and approached her. She looked at me and said, "Hi, I'm waiting for Dr. Jones." I said, "Yeah, I am Dr. Jones." She looked at me again, clearly disappointed, and said, "Oh, I assume Dr. Jones is a man." I tried to use my nicest voice while answering, "Well, you were wrong." There was a silence for a moment while I prepared my things. Then I heard a fake short laugh from her. "Look, honey, I'm not saying you're bad at your job. I'm sure you are really good at it, but I want to extract my tooth, and that requires lots of strength, and I believe it would be better suited for a male doctor." Now I'm so angry, but still trying to be nice. "I assure you, I have extracted many teeth before, and I can do it as well as any man." She didn't say anything. I left to get some more things that I needed, and as soon as I left, I saw her jump from her chair and went to the male nurse and begged him to extract the teeth instead of me, who calmly explained to her that he is not a doctor and she should just let me do my job. Now I'm fuming. I went back to her and said, "Do you want a male doctor?" She said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Fine then." I looked around and there he was, the exact person I was looking for, Kai. Kai is one of my classmates, and he sucks at his job. He is absolutely terrible. We even have a bet on when he will be kicked out. I took the patient to Kai and asked him if he wants to have my patient. He was more than happy to do so. Then I sat back and watched, and to my delight, Kai was also with Dr. Smith, which means he wouldn't get any help for the first 10 to 15 minutes. It was like Christmas come early. It was a disaster. I loved every second of it. I don't want to go through how much pain the patient was in, but I will say that she was in tears when it was finally done. It's a pity that Kai dropped out shortly after. I would have sent all of these kinds of patients to him. This totally reminds me of that old joke that says, "What do you call the doctor who was dead last in their graduating class? You call them doctor." Here's a whole new perspective on this story though. If you look at it from Kai's perspective, this is a heartwarming story where one of his classmates completely believed in his skill. This story comes to us from Sly Staller. "You just need to prioritize. Soon ex-boss." Hey, maybe not the most interesting or crazy story, but still some malicious compliance from my end. English is not my first language, so please be kind. I have been working in IT for the last 10 years. 4 of those in the company I am just leaving. I joined this company after a few bad experiences with coworkers and bosses. After getting to know some of the staff in the company, I was really happy about the coworkers and colleagues because most of them seemed to be really friendly. Into my second year at the company, I felt like we were understaffed in IT. Not too bad still, I thought. This was up until our workload increased. Before, we could handle the daily stuff in projects and on top could do some system upgrades over the year. Now, we were getting more and more work due to new regulations from corporate and more software that needed to be supported. During this time, I started asking my team leader to look for a new guy. We needed more hands. After a year of bringing this up at least once per month, my boss started with his speech about, "You just need to prioritize your work." Of course, this would not help if the work is at like 110% of the load that the current team could handle. We increased our hours and could get it done, but that was only for half a year. At this point, I was done with this whole ordeal. Corporate IT got more and more hostile if you did not message some people directly, what was prohibited normally. And on top, I saw people left and right leaving. After around 3 years of being with the company, I saw our trainee leave. I talked to him about pay and why he wanted to leave, not to deter him, but to understand his reasoning and show my support. And at that point, I have been passively looking for a job for about 6 months. It was at this time talking to my team leader and telling him that he needs to increase my salary by around 8% at least and bring more hands to the team. He was asking me why I wanted to leave. I told him about the problems that he knows and said I can't bring myself to stay in this company with the problems the team is facing. I just need to prioritize myself. He did not react, unfortunately, but I think he got the point. As a side note, later I heard from my boss, basically the one above my team leader and me, that my team leader has never asked for more people. And to be honest, I want to trust this guy because he was sincere all the time as far as I know. OP added a quick edit in down at the bottom. It says, I handed in my resignation and start my new job next month. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called the Old Man 1313. It says, I have worked in a lot of places where the potential workload far exceeded the man hours available. More often than not, when I asked about priorities, I got told they're all number one priorities. So I just worked on what I wanted to. After all, anything I did was a number one priority. OP responded to this one and said, that was basically the same here. I can understand you there. On the one hand, you have a project for Department 1 that needs to be prepared, and on the other hand, you need to fix stuff for the restructuring of Department 2. Both work that is basically ordered by the boss's boss's boss. So both is priority 1. Those are just 2 examples. Basically, most of the time, it was like 3 or more of those tasks. Well, OP, they did ask you to prioritize, and you just said, hey, I'm going to prioritize myself. So they asked for prioritization, and they got it, just not the way they exactly wanted it. OP, I wish you the best of luck in your new job. This story comes to us from ToughPainting6400, All You Can Eat. Many years ago, over 20, my wife and I kept a boat at a lake near our home. The marina had a restaurant that had an all-you-can-eat fried catfish on the menu. These catfish were whole and just about the size of a grown man's hand. We had been eating there 3 or 4 times a month for the past 3 years. I held the record of 17 catfish consumed, and Pete, the owner and cook, always said that I was maxed out and could never better my score. Now comes the malicious compliance. Wife and I had 10 family and friends visiting for my birthday, and we all went to the marina for dinner. I boldly and loudly announced that I was going to beat my record of 17 catfish. Obviously, Pete overheard my braggadocio and took our orders. A lot of beer was being consumed. Pete brought out 9 platters, turned to me and said, beat your record and everything is on the house. With cheers all around, Pete then said, fail, and you'll have to give Gail and Debbie a 25% tip. Everyone, including me, agreed and just knew we were getting a free meal. Pete went back to the kitchen and brought out my first catfish. That sucker weighed 5 pounds. I could not even eat the one. Everyone laughed and we did have a great time. And yes, the girls got their tip and I never messed with Pete again. Pete and I remained friends until he passed away last year. He never tired of telling this story. I love stories like this that are unexpectedly wholesome, but they also tell the story of somebody who's no longer with us. Did anybody else feel like Pete had been raising that fish in the back in a gigantic fish tank going, one day I'm gonna need you when he challenges me again? This story comes to us from Medium Savings 4968, Cheap Beats. Short and fun story, recent story in the last few months, one-time thing so far. Preface, my father and I share horrible handwriting. I have really curdy cursive. My dad's can be worse, and so he'll write in print. So this is one of the more recent cursive mixed print written times involving a grocery list where I made it funny. Okay, it was a prank. Story, I was at the store with this badly written grocery list. My dad was nice enough to break the list down into sections so I didn't have to run department to department. So when I got to the meat department, I saw something written as cheap beet. In actuality, my father had, odds are, written cheap beef. Translation, go check the manager's special section for whatever is cheap. I don't care, grab it. Still, I called to double check. Dad, hey, did you write cheap beets or cheap? Dad sounded half asleep and cut me off. Huh? What? Listen, I'm in the middle of working on something. You need to pick up whatever I put on the list. But Dad, I just need to double check. Look, I'm busy. Just buy what I have on my list and we'll sort it out later. Cue Malicious Compliance. Okay, Dad. I hang up and decide to have a little bit of fun. First thing I do is buy a cheaper cut in the manager special section. Cover my butt so dinner isn't ruined. Then, when I'm in the produce section, I look for beets. Guess what? Organic is on sale. I call up Dad again. Dad, how many cheap? Dad cuts me off. Look, either buy 2 or double or guess, okay? Good God. Can you at least tell me if you want organic? Yes, organically grown or grass-fed is fine. I took everything to the checkout and paid. As I walked in the house to drop off my father's groceries, he starts double-checking it. Hey, where's the... I finally got to cut him off. Right here. I hand Dad the bag of cheap beets. Cue surprised Pikachu face. You said everything on the list, and guess what? They were cheap. Dad looks at his list, sees his mistaken T for an F, and looks at his bag. Continuing surprised Pikachu face. We had a good laugh, and a few minutes later, brought him the real beef. Dad admitted he was actually asleep when I called earlier, so I woke him mid-nap, half flustered and annoyed. No fallout except I had to find an inventive way to cook beets, but thought the prank would be worth it to slug through one beet dish. Though Dad now checks his list and even walks up to me and says, "It's cheap beef, son," he still laughs. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Real Ultimate Papo. It says, organic beets can be absolutely delicious. Roast them skin on, peel, cube, and serve with goat or feta cheese and some greens. Pairs with discounted beef really well. Can we safely say for this one that OP administered a beating to their dad? It was a great story, and I think it's kind of funny that Dad continues to carry on the beef. OP, great work on your beat trail of Dad. This story comes to us from Mustard Unavailable. You can find a better place to stay? By all means, go ahead. So we're getting a couple of storms, and it's been heavy rain and wind for the past week. It's bad enough that certain areas are evacuated. I live in a pretty good house that can stand that level of wind and rain. Where it's located, flooding is not a concern. So relatives, friends, and neighbors are welcome if they need a place to stay. In comes Aunt Kay, 60s, my mom's sister, and her 3 children, female 32, male 28, female 20, with their children. Aunt Kay is a hassle, and honestly, I'd rather not deal with her, but her place isn't in a good spot. So I let them stay at my place until the storm blows over. Aunt Kay has been nagging and complaining non-stop. All she does is lays around on her phone, complaining about everything she can think of. Her kids have told her to stop, which turns into her becoming a raging, screaming witch. So one day while we're in the living room, Aunt Kay comes in and was talking to another aunt, Emma. Aunt Kay was complaining about my place, and Aunt Emma was trying to tell her off, but ain't no stopping that word-vomiting hag. Aunt Kay then says she can find a better place. Mind you, it's been raining all day and the winds have gotten stronger. You go outside and you'll be pelted and maybe fly off if you aren't careful. As her oldest is telling her to stop, Aunt Kay just keeps going and tells me my house sucks and whoever built it had crap for brains. That set me off as the house was designed by my parents and they put their heart and soul into it. So I told her to leave and find a better place then if she doesn't like my place. Aunt Kay looked offended and started telling Aunt Emma what I had just said. Aunt Emma told her off. Aunt Kay looked at me and just tried to go back to her bed, but I told her she had to leave and find another place. She didn't want to apologize and told me I was being sensitive and needed to respect my elders. I told her she didn't respect me, and since she could find a better place, she ought to leave. I wasn't backing down, so she went and got her stuff, and when she saw her kids and grandkids weren't going with her, she was not happy. I gave her an umbrella and some cash. That happened around 9 a.m. She came back around 2 p.m. drenched and defeated. She gave me a quiet apology and begged to be let in. Turns out she went around to some of her friends' places and even her boyfriend's, but they were either gone or telling her off for effing around in the storm. She now just lazes and keeps quiet. I don't care if she still complains, but at least I don't have to hear it. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, this happened in the Philippines. She did return the umbrella, but not the cash. It was $5, around 250 pesos, for fare. This is nothing new from her. She'll try to push boundaries to get her way, but if I'm near, I call her out on it. She's a big believer in respecting your elders, but what she did is seen as a massive FU. You don't insult hospitality. She's been getting verbal smackdowns from other relatives for what she did. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Deranged Kitsune. It says, make sure she understands that your generosity has reached its limits with her. Before the next rains come, tell her she needs to make arrangements to stay at one of those better places, because she certainly won't be back at yours. OP, I agree with this commenter. You need to set some boundaries and let her know that next time she can find somewhere else to go, because you're not going to let her walk all over you. I completely understand having respect for elders, but respect is earned and not automatic. I don't think she's earned the respect that she thinks she deserves. This story comes to us from McSmashly. Time to find a new job and accept any offer? Don't mind if I do. My former boss didn't realize that to actually make money, he had to show up for work. Instead, he came and went as he pleased, and expected me to pick up the slack, and essentially to play the role of receptionist, paralegal, office manager, and attorney. I never gave legal advice, he just expected me to, and so did his clients. His friend was my divorce attorney and worked in the same building, so he'd pop in just to chat, see how things were going, etc. But he started noticing my boss was absent more than not, and questioned how things were going. I started confiding in him that I was really concerned because I could see former boss shelling out more than he was making, and his clients were less than pleased at never being able to speak with their attorney. Then, former boss started doing some unethical and shady things to move cases along, and I started getting really nervous about what would happen if former boss got caught, and what it would mean for me. I told my attorney, former boss's friend, all of this, and he said that his own firm needed extra support staff, but he didn't want it to appear like he was poaching me from his friend on purpose, and that I had to talk with former boss about the state of the office and see if there was a way to salvage things. I never really got that chance though, because later that day, former boss stormed into the office and told me I needed to start looking for a new job and to just take the first offer I get, because he was probably going to have to shut his doors in the next 90 days, and he couldn't guarantee me a paycheck. I spoke with my attorney friend the next day about it, and he shrugged and said for me to just give my 2 weeks notice and call it a day. Later that same day, former boss came into the office and told me to hold off on finding a new job, and to give him a month to turn things around. Sorry, but I've got bills to pay, so I'm not going to sit idly and wonder if I'm going to see a next paycheck or not. I drafted my 2 weeks notice only because my attorney friend asked it of me as a professional courtesy to his friend, and gave it to my former boss at the end of the pay period. Cue surprised Pikachu look from former boss. You're leaving? But why? Per our conversation on such and such date, you advised me to find other employment, so I did. Where? Friend's law firm. Seriously? When I make this business work, I'm going to want you back. Is that going to be a problem? Good luck. What's he paying? Less than you and half the hours, but at least I know his checks won't bounce. I heard from my replacement on his first solo day, I trained him during my last week, that my former boss regretted telling me, on a whim, to leave, because I was the only one who knew anything about his cases. Sucks to suck. He shouldn't have left me to run his firm without help, knowing I'm not an attorney or licensed paralegal, while he went on lavish vacations and ignored all his clients. Even if former boss wanted to try to get me to come back, I've already been bumped to full-time hours and gotten a raise in less than a month, and there's promise of a second raise very soon to put me at what I was making at former bosses. But here, I get paid holidays, PTO, and sick leave. No way on God's green earth would I go back to former boss. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Malicious Compliance. It says, I bet the only reason your new boss didn't match your hours and pay at first was because you were left on your own so much, he wasn't sure how much you knew about the job. Guess it didn't take long to prove yourself and vindicate his instinct that you might be a good hire. OP responded and said, that was part of the reason, yes. My former boss also worked mainly with probate and county courts on administration and guardianship cases, whereas my new boss only does family law cases in district courts. There's a bit of a learning curve, but he was impressed at how quickly I can catch on and remember these different policies and procedures. Initially, my role was mainly clerical, but now I'm absorbing a few basic responsibilities of his paralegal, though only what I'm qualified to do, contacting courts and requesting copies of documents or initial drafts of basic documents. In my new boss's words, I'm not yet fully accountable for all my work since he or his paralegal review every document I am assigned. But once I lose my training wheels, that's when I get bumped up to my former salary. All's well that ends well. I love all the malicious compliance stories we get where a boss says, well, you should go find another job. And then the employee does, and the boss goes, why'd you do that? I also want to touch on one more thing here. When you're leaving a company and the boss of that company says, oh, where are you going? Where's your new job? You don't have to tell them. They might sabotage you at that new job, and it's really not their business. This story comes to us from Dashand. Manager doesn't allow skin color descriptions. Years ago, I was working at a corporate chain sports bar. One of the managers famously had short man syndrome, where he had to be right at all times, and didn't allow anyone to deviate from his edicts. One day, a server was asking him to go talk to a customer due to our mistake. When asked which person to speak to, the server replied, Table 300, the black guy wearing, as she was cut short by the manager yelling at her, we do not refer to people that way. We do not see race. We do not see color. They are all customers at this company. Do you understand me? Manager was sure to nitpick absolutely everything and micromanage her for the rest of the night. Fast forward a few weeks, same issue with the same server. Remembering his previous screaming fit, she told him to talk to the guy wearing orange at table 250. It was football season. Virtually everyone in the building was wearing the home team's orange. Manager had to awkwardly ask the customers who had an issue, deeply embarrassing him. Once he was back in the kitchen, he really laid into the server for embarrassing him before firing her on the spot. The next day, we all verified his previous instructions and her malicious but correct compliance. So the general manager was forced to call her up and offer her job back. Manager was not disciplined in any way, but that's restaurant life. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Pancake Nom. It says, what is embarrassing about, hello, I'm the manager on duty. I was told someone here has a concern. How can I be of assistance? OP responded to this one and said, that takes poise and social abilities that he did not have. Another commenter down below called Funky Pete said, to me, the race thing is fine if it's distinctive. If there are 4 people at table 300 and the person you are directing them to is the only woman, you would naturally say the woman at table 300. If there are 3 black guys and a white guy, saying the white guy at table 300 makes sense. Saying the white guy at a table full of white guys would be stupid, obviously. Yep, I agree with these commenters. This guy just really doesn't understand racism, so he thinks he needs to stop anything that refers to somebody as different. I feel like OP could have played around with this one a little bit more though. When the boss said, we don't see color here, OP could have just said, oh, okay, the person at that table there, the one in the jersey, yeah, they want to see you. That would just go over so well on game night. This story comes to us from X Fritzy. Guy who flips out over his internet speed gets less. So, a little backstory, I work for an internet provider company as a lead in the internet repair department. This means that I get calls from agents who work there that either need help with a situation because they are stuck and don't know what to do, or when a customer escalates the call asking for a supervisor, manager, or someone above them. My department mainly handles internet issues like being offline, outages, replacing equipment, etc. So the other day was like any other. I'm getting calls from agents needing equipment transferred from one account to another, scheduling a technician for customers who refuse to do any troubleshooting. The list goes on and on. One of my main calls is an agent asking for me to run a special tool that corrects the speed being sent to a customer. This usually happens when a customer upgrades or downgrades their internet speed and it doesn't take right away. And this only takes a couple minutes. This comes in later. On this particular day, I get a call from an agent that says her customer wants to speak to a supervisor because he is not getting the speeds he pays for. This happens quite a lot, usually because most people don't understand how the internet works and all the factors that come into the result of a speed test. This can include a lot of things, like how far away you are from your router, if you're testing on a Wi-Fi or directly connected, how many devices you are currently using, and even things like how your residence is built, because stone and concrete do not allow Wi-Fi signals to travel through. When I looked at the customer's account, I see that he is currently subscribed to 100 megabits per second. Our normal plans are 300, 500, and a gig, which is 1000. I asked the agent what results he was getting, and she told me it was 437 megabits per second, which is way over what he is paying for. I told the agent to go ahead and transfer him to me, and I'll continue the discussion. Once the customer gets to me, we'll call him Darren, I introduce myself and ask how I can help. Darren immediately begins yelling and cursing at me about how he's not getting what he pays for and is extremely upset, and even demanding credit to his account because of this. I begin to try and apologize to Darren and explain that speed test results can vary based on certain conditions. He cuts me off and states that he is recording the call and will be posting everything I say on social media. I tell him that that is fine, as all our calls are recorded for quality assurance purposes as well, and everything will be documented. Darren then proceeds to continue cursing, stating that this is unacceptable, and I should be ashamed of myself working for a company that does not provide the product people are paying for. While he rants on and on, I noticed that he had recently changed his internet plan from 500 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second 2 days ago. Now, as I mentioned before, sometimes the internet change doesn't happen right away, and we have to run a specific tool to fix it. This can happen when the modem has not been reset to reflect these changes. I try to tell Darren that he is receiving more than what he is paying for, and again, he cuts me off stating that he will be reporting us to the FCC, BBB, and filing a lawsuit about all this, all while recording our conversation. Now, normally I wouldn't care and I'd allow the speed to continue going through until the system automatically fixes it. But his attitude and rude demeanor made me feel otherwise. Cue the malicious compliance. I respond to Darren saying, "Sir, you are absolutely right, and I am so sorry you're not receiving the speeds you are paying for. I will get this fixed right away." Now, this plan that Darren was on, the 100 speed, is a plan that only certain customers can get if they're financially unable to make normal payments, meaning he had to apply for this program and be approved based on his low income. So I run the fix tool on his internet and reduce the speed down to 100 as he requested. I then ask him how his speed results are now. Darren then responds, "It's even worse than it was before. What kind of trick are you trying to pull on me?" I responded, "Sir, you told me you were not getting the speeds you were paying for, and you were right. You recently applied for financial assistance to be downgraded to 100, and I fixed that for you. It was absolutely wrong of us to be sending you 500 when you were only paying for 100. I apologize for the inconvenience." After a few minutes of silence, Darren then muffled to himself, "This is ridiculous," and proceeded to disconnect the call. I left notes on his account so any future agent would know what had happened that day, and that he was not entitled to any credit on his bill. All I can say is, be careful what you complain about. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called The Braino. It says, "I'm the other way. How often do I really need 500? 100 is plenty to just let a game download overnight. And how often do I really download a whole new game anyway? I have to pay $70 for 500 post-intro prices, and I keep trying to get downgraded to the 100 before they said they got rid of it." I think one of the biggest problems here is in the education of the customers on what a megabit and a megabyte are. There's also the fact that the ISPs use both of these in their documentation and advertising, and most people just can't tell them apart. Something I found really interesting on this one, in the comments there was a whole bunch of people from Australia saying that they can't get more than 100 megabits where they are. I guess that's in some of the rural areas. And here I am sitting in Canada, about 45 minutes outside of Toronto, on a 3 gig up, 3 gig down fiber line. It really is crazy how services are different all over the world. This story comes to us from Realistic Sorbet 2826. Never call you again? Okay, done. About a dozen years ago, I was working in a banking call center. The company was informed of some governmental change that required us to have a tax ID number for everyone with our business credit card account, and we had some ridiculously short time frame to be in compliance. There were tens of thousands of accounts with this ID missing. It hadn't been previously required. A big group of us were given lists of customers and told to call them and ask for the tax ID number. If they had it, we added it to the account and all was well. If they didn't have it, we were to switch them to a consumer, non-business card. If they didn't want that, we'd cancel on the spot. Due to the short time frame for compliance, the customer had to tell us on the call which they preferred. Another nifty caveat was that we were only making 2 calls and were not leaving messages. We couldn't drag this out waiting for people to eventually call us back. If we got the person on the first call, we were done. If we still didn't get them on the second call either, the account was auto-cancelled. This sounds like a horrible job to do, but it was actually going really well. 99% of the people I called were happy to comply or switch accounts. Then I called Karen. The phone rang and rang, and I was about to hang up when I heard that pause and double ring that tells you that the call was forwarded. So I waited. What? I could hear background noise like she was out in public. Hi, this is Jane Doe with the bank and why the F are you calling my cell phone? Are you effing stupid? I told you people to never call this number. I didn't. The call was, oh my god, now you're gonna lie to me? Pay attention. Never call me again. I use your credit card for everything and pay it, so you have no reason to call me. Got it? Yes, but phone disconnects. Malicious Compliance kicks off. Okay, so I spoke to you maybe a dozen words. You didn't provide your tax ID, and I can't call you back because you said to never do that. Next button, cancel. Notes, customer did not provide the tax ID and demanded we never call her again. I really hope she was out shopping and had fun when her card was declined at the next store. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Pancake Nom. It says, I don't know, if I got a completely unexpected call saying, hi, I work for your bank, I need your tax ID number right now or else I'll cancel your account, without any prior written notice or correspondence, that would seem incredibly fishy to me. Government regulations change slowly and generally have plenty of time for affected companies to transition to compliance with the new regulations. So unless your company ignored a change in requirements until the very last minute, there should have been adequate time to send out written notifications to the customers. So an unexpected call asking for sensitive information and making the request seem urgent and needing a response right that second are all major red flags for phishing. Completely agreed with this commenter. If you're calling me up and saying you need my sensitive information right now or you're going to cancel my account, I'm literally going to hang up on you and either call my bank or go into my bank to see what is going on and if this is legit. There really are other ways to handle this. So OP, I don't really understand what your company was doing here, but it doesn't sound very professional. This story comes to us from Honigman13. Forced to participate? Okay. A few years ago, my colleagues and I attended a training course. Part of it was communication, more theoretical than practical. The thing is, before this job, I taught communication, among other things, for several years at a nursing school. That's why I just sat there quietly during that part of the training course. I didn't want to ruin this part of the training for my colleague or for the course leader. During the short introduction round, I mentioned that I had taught communication, and that's why I was holding back. Apparently, the course leader didn't like that. She asked for participation, and I said again that I didn't want to mess up her lesson because I probably already knew what she was getting at. She then said something like, "If you don't participate, you won't pass the training course." She then went too far with the sentence, "My course is very advanced, you can't do that." Okay, if you have to. She had already written the letters S and E on the board, the standard beginning for the classic blackboard picture for Schultz von Thun's 4 ears model. Her last comment made me no longer want to be nice. Should I go to the blackboard or join in from my seat? With a triumphant smile, she pointed to the blackboard. Well, I basically explained the model from memory the way I used to in my lessons, including the standard example, easier to understand examples, and hints as to where the difficulties in understanding this model lie. After that, she explained at length to everyone that everything I had said was nonsense because I had not used the correct technical term for an ear, but a different word that meant the same thing. Somehow the rest of the communication part was very monologue-like because my colleagues were no longer interested in their lessons. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bakatari. It says, "She should understand that good communication is a two-way street. You might be the most eloquent person out there, but if the person you're talking with doesn't want to hear your message, then nothing you say will reach them." Her refusal to be a good communication partner cost her credibility and control of the class. Maybe she'll learn from this experience. Another user down below called Dr. Grabass said, "What a dumb trainer. I am literally a corporate trainer, and I love it when people already know things. That makes it easier for me, and I can just invite their experience into the conversation to enhance it. In fact, a good trainer knows that the most memorable training is when the people in the course can give insights to each other. Step 1 of any training, don't have an ego or think you know everything. A great course trainer is a facilitator of conversation, not a knowledge vault." Yep, it really sounds like this trainer didn't have any business being a trainer. They assumed things about OP, and we all know that assuming makes an ass out of you and me. But in this case, I think the only ass in the story was the person masquerading as a trainer. OP, I hope you reported them for being woefully inept at their job. This story comes to us from Tender Baby Ribs. "I'm not allowed to go outside of our travel agency to save money, so I didn't. I have quite a flair for finding cheap travel and accommodation. My travels on a strict budget have taken me to 3 continents so far, so I'd say I've picked up a few tricks. Nowadays, I get the pleasure of doing short trips with my work when attending conferences and seminars. As I prefer not to waste money, I've arranged the trips privately and then requested it paid back afterwards. It worked out well for all of us budget-wise. Then, we got new directions for handling travel costs. We all had to go through a new travel agency whenever booking. Well, anything. The top brass held a talk about it and everything. We were warned that onwards, any application for money back after a trip booked privately may be outright denied. I had tried to use the travel agency before, but found that it only allowed for a few overpriced airlines and hotels, and it wouldn't let you book anything outside of their approved connections. Cue Malicious Compliance. Where I previously combined train and bus tickets to reduce cost, I now just selected the top option. Oh, 5 times more expensive? Too bad. A nice low-range hotel that covered my needs? No longer available. Choose suggested option. I guess I will stay at the Hilton then. I just got back from a trip that cost 5 times what I could have paid if I'd been able to do my thing. No flights were available the day I could have left, so I went a day earlier. No afternoon flight was available after my meeting, so I stayed an extra night. I was basically off work half a week extra because of that travel agency, and the trip ended up costing more than my monthly paycheck. Oh, and the travel agency? They were apparently the lowest bidder on the contract, claiming they'd supply the cheapest travel options. I enjoyed the complimentary champagne. Okay, we don't need to jump to the comments on this one because I got more than enough comments to make myself. So, if you're traveling for work, and work wants you to travel and be happy about it, then putting you up in a nicer hotel actually makes sense for your productivity and your overall morale when it comes to the company. Another thing to think about is sometimes these companies will have rewards with these places that they're sending you to, or with the travel services that they're having you use. So whether it's like Air Miles or Aeroplan, or the Hilton rewards or whatever, there is something that's making it a good deal for them, even though they're paying more than if you were to go and stay in a drive-in motel. And as a final point, can you imagine going to a business meeting and the person that you're meeting with asks you where you're staying, and you tell them, "Oh, well, my company only paid for Jim Bob's Motor Inn." How good does that look on the company? Food for thought. Our last story today comes to us from OKP3414. We are not allowed to ship product using anything other than a certain company? Okay, sure. I work in the apparel industry, and one of our customers is a large company that often ranks in the top 10 companies in the Americas. One of their massive distribution centers is located only about 90 minutes from our facility. A while back, we completed a small order for them, which was only about 10% of our minimum order quantity. Instead of shipping it through Express, as per our usual method, we thought it might be quicker and cheaper to just drop it off directly at their nearby distribution center. After all, the shipping address was for their DC. However, when our driver arrived to make the delivery, the DC refused to accept it. No problem, we thought. We called the person responsible for our account on their side to explain the situation. To our surprise, they were extremely rude and said, "We do not intend to accept any deliveries made by any method other than the contractually agreed Express." They even sent several emails to our VP, president, and our holding company's CEO, accusing us of not following the contractual shipping method. In the end, our driver returned, and we shipped the order via Express as originally required. Fast forward to 3 weeks ago, we received a frantic call from them with a sizable but urgent order. We discussed timelines and agreed on a delivery date over email. Despite their request to use any means necessary to meet the deadline, we shipped the order through Express as per the contract. However, this caused an uproar. There were multiple heated phone calls, and eventually, our holding company CEO got involved. He bypassed their vendor manager and went directly to their purchasing and inventory VP, complaining about the manager's unprofessional behavior and citing the earlier email where they insisted we use Express. We followed the contract perfectly, even sealing the trailer and marking it with the shipping date. It wasn't our fault that the Express truck didn't arrive to pick up the trailer until 1 a.m. We did everything by the book. As a result of this mess, the customer just lost 9 major universities from their college football vendor management portfolio. Alright, I don't know if anybody else is seeing it this way, but I look at this one as a lose-lose for both companies. Even though OP's company followed the contract, their insistence on doing so in this urgent situation may have indirectly contributed to the customer's loss of business. And if the vendor loses those key clients, it's likely their demand for apparel will decrease, which means fewer orders for OP's company. So they avoided the immediate blame, but the long-term consequences will negatively affect their revenue. This story comes to us from Mysterious Title 171. Lazy class partner didn't help at all for our term project, even while I was in the ER. At the end of the semester, he acted as if he was entitled to get an A like I did. This happened a few semesters ago where I was taking a course in urban design. Everyone was grouped in threes, but one of my group members wanted to join another group with their friend, so I ended up with one other person. Not sure why the professor thought this was okay, but I wasn't too worried because I was fairly confident in my ability to do the work. The course incorporated previous studio courses to tie together in a massive topic of urban planning, which included architectural design, environmental sustainability, urban infrastructure, and historic preservation. I tried to brainstorm with my partner on which direction we should go. My idea was focused on residentials, as housing would address a huge demand here in New York City. However, my partner seemed content on making the project about industrial buildings, so I focused there. We brainstormed on different ideas, but I got the impression that he just wanted me to take the lead, as he mostly agreed while not giving much input. Weeks went by, and I constantly updated my partner on my progress via WhatsApp, while rarely getting any update or feedback from him. It annoyed me a bit, but I was still confident in my work, which was enough to get us through the next checkpoint during our next presentation. At some point during the semester, I got a really terrible kidney stone. It wasn't from junk food or a poor diet. In fact, it was from eating too much black beans and chickpeas. A side note, I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of food which I used to come up with a meal plan that meets my macro needs. I did feel way better with my new diet, but it eventually led to me having my worst kidney stone of my life that put me in the ER. I was on all kinds of pain meds and had to stay there for several nights, but it didn't end there. The stone was so big that it got stuck. I needed surgery to put in a stent. Don't look up how they put it in, it still gives me nightmares. I had to wait several more weeks and endure painful urination daily and having yet another surgery to remove the stent before finally recovering. Throughout this whole time, I managed to put in some work into my project. I was surprised to learn that my partner did absolutely nothing and waited for me to continue my work. Like, what the actual F? To make it worse, I learned that he tried to present my work as his own. How can people be like that? I emailed the professor about my situation. I explained how I've done all the work so far and sent him screenshots of the chat as well as my project file, which includes all the history logs. The professor reminded me that during the final submission, everyone had to put their initials on the slides of the work that they worked on. Okay, got it. Luckily, I was recovered and ready to present my work. I left out the initials as it wasn't required for presentation, only for the final submission. I felt the need to see what he'd do. I even tried to cut him some slack and gave him some talking points on the parts I'd allow him to claim as his own, even though it was fully my work. He didn't. He kept cutting me off during presentation to talk about my project as if he had anything to do with it. He mostly repeated the same information that I mentioned while not bringing anything of value to point out. The final presentation had several judges who were comprised of local professionals in high-level positions within the industry. The conversation was always directed at me, so I had a good feeling that everyone understood that I did most of the work, as I knew all of the intimate knowledge of the parts. Then came the last day to submit our work. The final slides included my initials on every single page. Apparently, my partner missed that part about the initials and also submitted an older version of my work. A few weeks go by and I hit him up asking what he got. I was surprised to learn that he actually passed with a C+. He was surprised to hear that I received an A- and promptly said that he'll have a talk with the professor on why he received such a low grade. Honestly, why are there people like this? Anyway, not sure if it's malicious compliance, but I did do everything as instructed and ended up having one heck of a semester. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Mr. Spiffenheimer. It says, I hate how the professors say that they'll take individual effort into account with the grade and then don't really follow through. At least he got a C+ instead of an A-, but that's still roughly 80 points more than he should have gotten if he didn't do any work. Or, being generous, 30 points for his brainstorming and presentation participation. Either way, an F. Alright, does anybody else feel like the professor just passed this guy because the professor didn't want to put up with them for another semester? Like, hey, if I fail you, I have to see you again, and that's not good for me. So here's your barely passing grade, now get out of my room. This story comes to us from Alchemist Gamer, the 3-cut minimum. I have always hated mowing the lawn. At the same time, I don't want to be that neighbor, so I do my best to stay on top of the lawn. However, while I started out strong this summer, I had a series of medical issues that left me in a state that mowing was a bit too much than I could handle. Add in a few other excuses on the few remaining times I could mow, the lawn was making me look like I was the neighbor I didn't want to be. I decided I'd pay someone to mow for a change and then pick it back up once it was back under control. My first mistake was when the company I contacted had advertised a one-time cut, but when calling to schedule service, notified me they have a 3-cut minimum. I should have backed out then. I didn't. The first mower showed up and canceled the mowing, claiming my lawn was 100% over 23 inches, and as such, for excessive height, and proceeded to list that they'd charge me a 500% markup for the service. The photos taken were of the few higher points in the lawn, all my front yard, with a tape measure you couldn't read the numbers off of. I was annoyed to say the least, and I tried to originally cancel here, but hit with the whole contract bit. So I told them I'd mow it, and I'd just use them to end the season and take it easy. I actually only mowed the front lawn, and even then, not the whole lawn. Miraculously, 2 weeks later, the mower that showed up did the whole lawn, and somehow didn't see the backyard that I left untouched was a problem. The next mowing day came and went and no one showed, so I reported it and canceled the mowing through the app. Despite canceling, someone showed up the following day. I'm annoyed and I want out, so I go into the app and try to cancel my service again. It looks like the service was canceled and I saved screenshots. Then today, I get a message saying my mower is on the way. Here's the thing, we have had a drought for the last month or so, it's the end of the season, and my lawn hasn't grown even a half inch in the last 2 weeks. I am beyond furious at this point. I wait until the guy shows up, I talk to him, he's a great guy. He's a contractor for this booking company, which is what I thought was the case. He tells me he gets this all the time. He lets me know he's going to send a message to the company. I felt bad his time got wasted, but there wasn't much I could do about that. An hour later, I get a message showing I'm rescheduled for tomorrow. I'm done. So I call them up, and after speaking with one agent, I get to the escalation team. He tells me my service is canceled, but I still have one mowing as per the contract. We go back and forth for a bit and he won't budge. I ask him if he would schedule snow removal in the middle of summer, so why should I schedule mowing when it isn't needed? Nothing. Fine, schedule me for June in 2047. June when, sir? June 4th, 2047. I'm sure I'll need my lawn mowed then. We can't schedule that far in advance. He's insistent it has to be this or next year, but I keep pushing. And I remind him that I agreed to a 3-cut minimum, and nowhere in any of the conversations did the company specify a restriction on when. So, I wanted to schedule it on June 4th, 2047, and he needed to make that happen. One moment, sir, while I talk to support. I wait for another few minutes, and then he comes back. Your service is fully canceled. No one is coming out. I think OP missed a bit of an opportunity. They could have talked to that second person who came out, the one who did everything without complaining, and gotten their number and hired them directly in the future. None of this going through a service that sends out a contractor. That's just a cash grab for a middleman. And you probably get a better deal going directly through the person who's actually cutting your lawn anyway. This story comes to us from Floating a Waste. Sprained ankle, boss wanted a doctor's note to pay 1 day of sick time, now he's paying a week. I twisted and sprained my ankle Monday morning, packing up our camp from Labor Day weekend. Having done this a few times in the past, I didn't want to bother to have it checked out. Who wants to pay $1,000 for urgent care to tell you to rest and ice it? Yay, America! So I went to work Tuesday. I got morning stuff done and explained the situation to my boss. Told him I'd need to take the day because it was swollen and painful, and I needed to rest and be off of it in order for it to heal. He gets in a tizzy because God forbid anyone needs to miss work for anything at all ever, and snaps at me for not planning to go to the doctor. Wednesday, I go into work, still limping and still wearing improper footwear. I can only fit the injured foot into a crock without unbearable pain. The first thing the boss says is, "Don't you think you should get that checked out? I don't understand why you don't want to just pay for it." I explain again that I've had this injury in the past. It's definitely not broken, and honestly not even as swollen as it has been when I've done it before. I want to be at work to keep up on things and make everyone's job less difficult. I would just need to take it easy for a couple days, which isn't a problem considering I can do 90% of the job from my desk. And the 10% slack is beyond easy for everyone to pick up, especially when not being there makes them pick up 100% of it. This gets met with more attitude, so I ask if I'll be getting paid sick time for the day I missed yesterday. He says no, not without a doctor's note. You can visibly see the injury clear as day, and I'm trying here, so WTF. I'm fed up by this point, so a little later on I say, okay, and leave to go to the doctor's for the note he wants so badly, knowing full well what they'll say to treat it, and that I'll need to be off of it for 3 to 5 days. After an x-ray, and getting the, yep, it's sprained, keep doing what you've been doing, I let them know my boss asked for a note for missing a day of work to rest it. Doc asks if I want to be at work to do what I can to stay off of it as best as possible. I said that's what I've been trying to do, so I'm fine with that. I do have sick time if it would be more beneficial to be off of it for a couple days. She comes back with a note that I may return to work on 9/9, which would be Monday. I took a picture and shot it over to Boss Man, just the photo. He replies, "What's wrong with the ankle?" Which I met with no response considering none is needed. He got his note. I just wanted a day of sick time, 8 hours. Now he's paying me 4 days, 32 hours. He can't refuse a second of it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bridge Over River RMB. It says, American healthcare needs to be changed. Everyone knows it and it's not happening. One reason is universal healthcare would allow so many small businesses to start. I know so many people that want to start a business but can't because they'll lose healthcare. OOP, don't you know you're supposed to schedule out your injuries in advance so that you don't inconvenience your boss and their finely tuned schedule? I sincerely hope that while you're taking your mandatory couch time and relaxing as per the doctor's orders, that you completely turn off your phone and don't accept a single call or message from anybody at work. This story comes to us from Tom Rummitz Cald, dealing with a nosy, toxic neighbor using a brother-in-law and a decommissioned hearse. This was way back in 2012, but it still feels so darn good to think about. We had just moved into our new house in a small and nice, but not posh neighborhood. Our neighbor Betty was aggravated from the very beginning. She had a perfect view of the neighborhood playground, as did we, but she really hated the fact that kids would enjoy themselves on said playground. In the first 2 months of us being there, she called the cops on the kids playing 3 times. Needless to say, the officers were not very content with her either, but every time she would say something about drugs, violence, etc., basically forcing the police to take action. I finally confronted her and told her that the kids had every right to play there, and that she should get her crap together or move out to the country. She then went on a toddler's tirade and said that she would hire a private investigator to keep an eye on things as she had other more important things to do anyway. Keep in mind that Betty was a senior citizen, so of course my conscience would not allow me to have her pay for such an inconvenience. Luckily for her, my brother-in-law was just out of a job and needed something to pay the bills. And as I had set out to make my neighbor as happy as possible, I thought I could get 2 birds with 1 stone. So I rang him up, and within 2 days, we had set the new company up, Tommy's PI office. My brother-in-law is a bit scruffy looking, wearing mostly overalls and Crocs, but I figured he would be perfect for the job, as no one would suspect him of being a PI. I then went along and got him a company car, as he might have to pursue the 10-year-olds playing on the swings and dealing in their spare time. Luckily, we found this magnificent beast, an old Ford hearse, which would be perfect for a good long stakeout. Fortunately for me, I got a family discount, so I didn't have to put down a lot in wages, and the hearse was just over $1,000. So we placed Tommy and his new company hearse in front of Betty's house on the public road, so she would no longer have to worry about keeping an eye on the small criminals across the street. Within 2 weeks, she finally got enough of people checking in on her and politely asked Tommy if he would give up his stakeout. We didn't get any more complaints after that. Alright, I've gotta mention that lower down in the comments, in response to somebody else on a comment that was completely unrelated, OP mentioned that they named the hearse Betty's Destiny. That is perfect. They also mentioned that after this was all over, they managed to sell the hearse with a profit. So no complaints there. So in the end on this one, Betty got her PI, Tommy got a job, and OP didn't have to worry anymore, and the police didn't have to respond to Betty's calls. So everybody won. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.